Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I don't know if people are aware of how podcasting works. They'll give you a little tour of how the sausage is made, but generally there's a lag between the time you record and when you release. And this episode is coming out in March, but I am actually recording it on January 2nd, 2023. Happy New Year to everybody. If you were on my last episode, I think it was my last one of the year. But at any rate, the reason I think it's kind of interesting that it's January 1st. It's the 1st of January. People have all these resolutions, and generally resolutions will fall in one of a few buckets. One, certainly weight loss. There's a biggie. Finance is another one, and then the other one's relationships, which this podcast is about. Today's guest, Chris Felton, he's an author. A best-selling Amazon author, and he's a seven-figure entrepreneur and founder and principal of his own financial services firm, which he started back in 1999, which is last millennium, actually. But he's helped tens of thousands of people internationally to overcome their resistance to change, to create more success, as well as peace, and impact their lives. He speaks from his own experience, though, and we'll get into a lot of that, of being on the edge of financial ruin, business failure, and even divorce. He shares the secrets that have allowed him to avert potential disaster and transform all areas of life. So, Chris, welcome to the program.
Frank, Happy New Year. It's awesome to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what prompted the writing of the book? And before we really get into the meat of it, let me put it this way. Most financial advisors don't sit down and write a book, right? They're just out there trying to get the next dollar, if you will.
Yeah. Well, having been an entrepreneur for over 23 years, Frank, I know what it's like to be really stuck and to live in fear, doubt, worry. I know what it feels like. You feel like you're doing everything possible and nothing changes. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting worse. And I was just a mess in so many areas of my life. And I've coached a lot of people on how to get unstuck.
Yeah.
But it's difficult for me to watch people get so stuck that they just give up, and they settle and they go in reverse and they think that's the thing to do, but ultimately it's not. And I was this close to doing that very thing, but instead of quitting and staying stuck, I just went all in on my personal growth and development, invested, 6 figures, spent thousands of hours just trying to get out of my own way. And so I wrote the book because, I don't want people to have to go through the journey I went through.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to definitely invest the money I did. So I'm just, I wrote it to serve people because I think there's just a lot of stuck people right now. So that's why I wrote it.
Well, I would venture to say that being stuck, or the feeling of being stuck, is more the rule than the exception. I just think that's, we don't see that of other people. Right, because we only see what they show us, and Facebook, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, is wonderful for the highs and the lows. Look at Johnny graduated or got a scholarship or whatever. Grandma died, but it's that middle junk that the day to day that people don't see, and it does get hard. I mean, that's, back in the early 90s, I was kind of where you were at. I was working at a big firm, and it just every day seemed like the next. And, I finally I finally left and went into private practice, and I don't know if that's taking a step back, but I just took a different path, and it's been great. It's been great. I didn't invest six figures into personal development, but oh well. So I guess talk about just some of the. There's a couple chapters in the book that really kind of jumped out at me. You have a chapter on forgiveness and your need to always be right. If you could share a little bit about those, that would be great.
Yeah, where do you want me to start?
I'm looking for the notes I had on you. What did I do with those damn things? People hear me flicking through papers. You had
that's fine. I'll talk about forgiveness because I think that's a I do a lot of a lot of speaking. Nationwide, and like you said, I'm a financial guy, and people expect me to come in and talk about left brain stuff, but it's really the stuff internally that determines our external world. And so basically I was at really the end of my rope, Frank. I was $250,000 in credit card debt. I'm a financial advisor. It's in the middle of the Great Recession. I went through a painful, expensive divorce. My second and last wife, Marlo, walked into a nightmare, and she couldn't believe that I was a CPA and financial advisor, and I was broke and failing, and I did such a good job of hiding it from her. So we had a fight that kind of came to the head of it, and it was the turning point in my life. And basically, we decided to stay together, not declare bankruptcy, stay in business, not get a job. But I had to start doing things differently because, I was the common denominator of all my problems. Wherever I've had a problem in my life, I've always been there.
Yeah.
And so I just went all in on growing and developing, and based on my personal results, it wasn't getting it done. So I hired a coach who was financially independent, was exactly where I wanted to be. And he started working with me. I paid him with money I barely had. And the first session, I'm a CPA, I'm a financial advisor. I'm looking for strategies and tactics and processes. And at the end of our coaching meeting, Frank, he said, all right, here's your homework assignment. And being a CPA, I'm like, oh, goody, homework, right? And he says, you need to forgive your ex-wife. And I'm like, what? She's a horrible person. Like, what are you talking about? And he said, dude, you don't get it. If you don't forgive her, it won't matter what I do. You're going to be a broke joke the rest of your life. You won't let your wealth in. And if you don't do it, I'm going to fire you and keep your money. He's like, it's not optional, bud. And I'm like, all right, I'm pretty desperate. I got to turn my life around. And I said, what do I need to do? He's like, when we're done talking, I want you to grab a pad of paper. I want you to write her name at the very top. And I want you to write everything you appreciate about her and stay with it. And then you got to do it tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And you got to keep doing it. And you'll know when you don't necessarily need to do it. And so we ended it. Pretty coachable guy, had no other choice, grabbed a pad of paper and a pen, and I wrote her name at the top. And Frank, I've never stared at a blank sheet of paper for an hour.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, he's onto something here, man. Like, the resentment is so strong. And right at the top of the hour, I just wrote, she's a great mom. I wrote that down. And then I did it the next day, and I found a few other things that I appreciated about her. And the next day. And then eventually I didn't have to sit and write it. I would just run a list through my head of what I appreciated about her. And I kept finding more and more. And what happened was, over time, Frank, you probably know how the brain works, right?
Yeah.
Neural pathways start rewiring. And my whole view of her transformed. Everything changed about her. Then it was, yesterday, happy New Year's. I mean, it's been a long time, but it shifted. It changed. My kids were small. They lived in Atlanta, Georgia. Everything transformed, and our relationship changed. My kids are 21 and 18 now. They're thriving, and I haven't had a negative thought about her for years. And it was transformation. And you and I could do 2 hours of a show of like the blessings that have come from that.
Yeah.
But it's astronomical. And the reason I wrote it, and I made a commitment, I would always end a keynote talk on that, is people don't really know how to do it. They don't know how to forgive, and they don't realize how destructive it is. So
yeah, that's a powerful story. It reminds me of a story. Dr. Rob Bell, he's a sports psychologist, shares a similar story. He, when he was in grad school, was working for a baseball team at a particular college. The baseball coach was supposed to pay him, didn't. He hated that guy for years, and he just realized that this was just a poison that he was carrying around. Coach had no idea, right? When we hate people, when we have resentment, most people don't know because they're out of our lives. He just sent the guy a Christmas card. He just, cognitive dissonance. I'm going to send the guy a nice Christmas card. I don't think he went to the extent you did, but he said it just changed how he felt, and then ultimately the relationship with the guy. Still not happy about not having the money, but it's only money, right? How it impacts our lives is what matters more. This whole forgiveness thing. I mean, again, that's a great story. My question is have you had to, two-part question, have you had to revisit that exercise yourself, maybe with an employee or something like that? Have you taught people that you got thousands of people that you work with? Have you shared that, not shared, but asked somebody else to do that same exercise to get themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've asked a ton of people because it is the root of a lot of things. I got a friend who's kind of he's a naturopath healer, and he said anytime he works with cancer patients, one of the first things he asks them is, do you need to forgive somebody? And 100% of the time they're like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, dis-ease, right, is disease. And so no, it's huge. And like I said, I've closed many hundreds of talks on it, and I'll cover 8 to 10 different topics, Frank, and I think they're all pretty powerful. But when I come off the stage, almost 90% of the time, somebody comes up to me and says, wait, you're telling me that I have to, like, you don't know my situation, right? I mean,
yeah, right.
I'm like, you're stuck, you're broke, you're not where you want to be. So, you're paying a pretty heavy price for not letting go. So yeah, I talk about it all the time. And yeah, I mean, and a big part of my book is, our addiction to being comfortable, our addiction to, wanting the outside world to change while we insist on staying the same.
Mm-hmm.
And the victim approach to life, which is outside in, doesn't work. And the inside out approach is what always works. And so, and I'm not a guru. I don't have it figured out. I mean, I make more mistakes before 9 a.m. than most people make all day, but I have significant awareness of how I trap myself, and judgment is public enemy number one by a mile. Judgment of others, judgment of self. And so what happens is we resent somebody, we start judging them, and we start spinning stories and making up stories. And then that resistance that leads to resentment, that leads to revenge, and a negative thought of another person as a form of revenge. It's just, it's a massive energy drain, and it crushes us, and it takes our focus off of what we want. So, so I have a big journal that for years, Frank, I write down situations that have me, I'm attached, I'm pissed off, I'm upset, I'm playing the victim card, whatever. And then I write down what I make up about it. And it's pretty powerful. And then, I go through the forgiveness process of, forgiving the other person. And I share a lot of those techniques in the book. But then I'll come back 7 days later, 10 days later, and I'll read what I wrote in the heat of the moment. And I'm like, that could not have been me. Like, it was like an alien came into my body and abducted the loving Chris Felton. And it's nuts. And so I've collected evidence over many years that my ego is primarily insane. And judgment that's what starts it. So like I said, I'm better than I used to be. I'm not perfect, but I think everybody wants peace, and you can't have peace unless you have forgiveness. Forgiveness is the path to peace.
Yeah. My daughter, who's she's out of college now, but when she was in high school, she hit me with a saying, your first thought makes you human. Your second thought serves to define you. And I think, when we're these judgment thoughts, you say, which are our worst enemy, those are our first thoughts. It's just human. It's human to be angry at people. And as you're talking, I can think of a few situations this past year where it's like, I just got stuck in a rut and I need to take your advice and just start a journal and just, you know what? I appreciate this person. Not happy about this, like Dr. Rob Bell, not happy I didn't get paid, but that's not going to change. And being mad about it's not going to change it. It's not affecting them. It's just affecting me. I need to move beyond it. I guess the other question I have with respect to your wife, did you ever share the story? Or, did she just see the new Chris Felton is like, what's wrong with this guy? Or did you say, hey, I've come to this revelation about you, or you just kind of moved on from it?
Well, yeah, no, I haven't shared, but the book launches in March, and
she'll know then.
my kids will have a couple of copies, and she's got nothing to worry about. I definitely make her out to be the hero because I created the mess. So I hope she reads it. I don't know if she will, but I make her and her husband out to be, and it's not a story. I mean, they're phenomenal. She had no chance with me. Didn't matter if she was perfect or not. So no, I didn't share, but once again, I think everything's is energetic, and people pick up on your energy, and being hyper focused about growing and developing. I think she could see the changes over the years. She certainly changed for the better. And it just, it worked out as harmonious, and one of the greatest blessings that came from that exercise. So
no, that sounds great. It sounds like it was worth every dime you spent with the coach. I'm sure you got more out of it.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears real quick here. Being right. What's that cost you? Do we need to be right?
Yeah, the chapter in my book is the need to be right will cost you your life. And my former background, I was Big Six public accounting with Arthur Andersen, and spent 7 years with the number one accounting firm in the world. And being right was revered. Being right was, you had the brains, you win arguments, right? You get promoted. It's us versus them. And that is okay in a corporate environment. Eventually that's going to unravel and create a tremendous amount of stress. You'll eventually pay the price for that. But when I started my financial services business, I have a volunteer army that follows me, and I needed to be right. I needed to have the answers. I needed to be all that. It was just habitual. And then, I hired my coach, and we got in an argument, and I wasn't letting go. And I don't remember what the argument was, but I absolutely needed to be right. As you know, Frank, when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. And
the amygdala, hijacked your brain.
Yeah. And he was just like, dude, do you want to be right, or do you want to be at peace? And I was like, oh my Lord, he had 3 or 4 zingers over our 4 years working together that they were just bombshells. And I'm like, I have no peace anywhere.
Did you catch that in the moment when he said that, or was it something where you did? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he said, do you want to be right or you want to be at peace?
Yeah.
I'm like, he's like, how did that work in your first marriage?
Yeah.
Needing to be right, failed. It's like, how's that working with your agents? They don't even want to be around you. I'm like, who, right? You know what it's like when someone's right and you feel wrong? Like, you want to get away. And then he said, dude, your need to be right will absolutely cost you your life.
Yeah. I've noticed that with my kids, that as they have grown, they're 26, 25, and 23 at this point. Our relationship improves more and more as I defer to them for help. When they're teenagers, I'm dad, I'm right. This is what we're doing. But when it started to, hey, can you help me with this? What's your opinion on that? And they've started to feel that respect. I think it really started to change things. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the, one of the many upsides of being intentional about growing yourself is you don't need it. You don't need the external validation. You don't need the affirmation, right? You care less about what other people think because you know what you think about you.
Yeah.
And I don't need to be right. I'm good with me. And you need less of that external validation. So you don't need to make something that turns something into, or, what am I trying to say there? Be the center of attention, right. Have all the answers, because you don't need the external validation anymore.
Well, it's akin to the saying, this is not a hill I want to die on. Right. I mean, where you just, okay, you know what, you might be right, but I'm just going to back off and let them be right, or it might be something where it's totally opinion. Those are the arguments that I just kind of like, I can't change this person's mind. It's their opinion. I can't argue with it. So okay, I can't argue with that.
Yeah. Being right's overrated.
Yeah, it is.
Massively absolutely overrated. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears here as we're kind of winding down. Talk about the book. Talk about where people can get it. You're an author. You're a speaker. Your financial services business. Self-promote, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah. So if this is going out in March, pre-sales for my book are ready to roll February 1st. So thinkgrowyou.com is where the book is going to be available. Anybody that's in the Colorado area, I got a pretty big launch event happening March 25th of 2023. So it's going to be a noon to 4 event. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking to, do speaking, do workshops. I mean, the book is, it's loaded with, a lot of great stuff. There's probably 5 to 7 workshops in there. And I know for, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, really anybody, it's like, I just want to get to the next level, but it's not happening. I'm in my own way. Then, I'm always open to, helping those people and figuring out what I can do to deliver a message that helps them. So yeah, man, I'm 51. When I turned 50, I had the epiphany that I wasn't getting out of this thing alive for the first time in my life. Yeah. It was pretty magical where I'm like, you're going to die one day. And what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And it's, I just, like you, Frank, I know you, and I just want to make a big impact and get a message out that helps people. And I think I've done it in a way in the book that I throw myself under the bus many times in attempting to help people learn from the mess that I was, to make the shifts, to level up, and hopefully have more success, peace, and impact in their lives. So that's what I'm all about. And I'm happy to, help anybody that needs it.
All right. The name of the title of the author is Chris Felton. The title of the book is Think and Grow You. You can go to thinkandgrowyou.com. I will get that in the show notes for our friends out there driving. Chris, this is actually releasing on March 1st. I just checked the release schedule. So this is going to work out well. for things you have going on. So if you're listening, you're interested, if you're in the Denver area, he's got some things going on there. You can get pre-sale. Will probably be available at that time, but I'll get this in the show notes. So really appreciate your time. Fascinating stories, fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Frank, for having me. Appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.